spectacular artists Samarth and Julia Bourdet, who are here on a residency program. So this is a cross residency by the French Embassy that offers a duo, and this year it is Julia and Samarth, who are graphic novelists or comic book authors, the opportunity to explore the artistic scenes of India and France while working on a joint project. The selected duo will spend the first part of their residency in Angoulême, where they will discover the entire ecosystem of the city dedicated to images, in particular the resources of Cité Internationale de la Bande Dessinée et de l'Image. So you all have already spent 1 month, right, in Angoulême? Yes. The two authors will then be hosted in Goa. So they are currently residing at Sunaparanta, the Goa Center for the Arts. They are participating here at the Goa Arts and Literature Festival. So Samarth, him, is an artist, graphic novelist, and an arts educator based in a village near Aniket in Uttarakhand. He works with the pen name Roequin, and his practice is primarily centered around sequential art. His first graphic novel, Sweet, was published by Yoda Press in 2022. His stories are situated within the context he inhabits. The people, settings, and ecologies that surround him constitute the fabric through which his stories are woven. As an arts educator, he has been associated with the Happy Children's Library, where he has been conducting weekly comics and arts workshops. These workshops, titled Comic Karnam, are an effort to develop a contextual arts pedagogy using comics and sequential art, for which he received the Leela Mukherjee Art Educator Grant in 2024. And now to Julia. Julia Bourdet is an illustrator, screenwriter, and artistic director. After beginning her career in advertising, she turned to press and publishing, working with Fluid, Glacial, and Stock, where she designed impactful book covers. In 2022, she published her first graphic novel, a feminist and ecological coming-of-age tale set in medieval Japan. In 2024, she was selected for the Villa Albertine residency, undertaking a low-carbon journey across the Atlantic and the US to meet climate activists and thinkers. Her current work explores ecological transition through drawing, storytelling, blending, travel, reflection, and personal transformation. And here in Goa with Alliance Française Panjim, Julia and Samarth will engage in field visits. They'll draw on-site portraits. And with schools, we're going to develop a pedagogy that draws Goa's rivers, wetlands, wells, and coastal ecosystems, seeking to reflect the emotional, historical, and political meanings they hold for those who live with and protect them. Thank you, and over to you too.
Thank you.
It's a whole program, huh?
Yeah. Thankfully, it's just 40 minutes. Thanks for being here. I mean, I'm really glad that there's so many people. I thought it would be around 5 or 10. So already feeling quite lucky that all of you all decided to attend. I think since it's just 40 minutes, we decided not to have any presentations as such. It'll just be a conversation. In fact, if any of you feel like you'd like to step in halfway in between to ask a question, feel free. I also feel like we've already spent a month and a half together, and we've just spoken a lot. So I realized that generally, like, having exchanged so much information over the course of a month and a half, there's a lot of ideas that we've been able to exchange, and to be able to see another artist working with a similar medium and sharing a space with them, it's been extremely informative. You're able to see resonances with your own practice, differences in cultures as well. And I think that was pretty much what we were keen to talk about, that we didn't really end up working on comics for the last month and a half, but we did end up thinking quite a bit about everything around comics and making of comics and living a life as a practitioner who wants to make comics.
Yeah, I mean, this whole residency is mostly about research. So it's really about experimentation with the medium, going to music practice. We will tell you a little bit more about that after.
Yep.
And so sometimes we step a little bit out of the comic book itself making for thinking, maybe meeting other artists also and their whole process, because like meeting Samart for me was really a discovery about like the whole like comic in India scene. So it was much more about like discovering and being guided also in our own countries. I don't know for you in France. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about Angoulême?
Okay, I mean, sure. I think that's a good place to start because this is my first residency. I don't know how many of you are practicing artists and how many of you have already been for residencies before. This was my first proper residency and it was spectacular. I feel like I mean, something that I was talking to Julia about as well, that it happened at a point in time in my life when I really needed that sense of community and a little container within which I'm able to speak freely without having to explain what I do for a living, in some sense. So just for some context as to where I was and what we did, there's a town called Angoulême in France, and it's known as the International City of Comics. They have a huge festival that happens. Is it the largest?
It's the largest in Europe.
It's the largest in Europe, apparently. And the festival is hosted by the city. There's a lot of international comic book authors, graphic novelists who come there. What's more significant is that France has a thriving scene of graphic novels and comics. And it's not just about having a lot of authors. There's just a lot of readers. There's so many people who are buying comics and graphic novels, promoting the medium pretty much.
Yeah, actually this is the leading scene that it leads the book market in France, the comic book, the comics books, mostly mangas, they are the first, but just after you have graphic novels and then comics. So it's huge, like money-wise it's huge.
Yeah, so what was really nice was that the entire city, like imagine a city where there's so much effort that goes into building that culture that they have a museum of comics where they document all of the they have massive archives of all of the comics that have been published within Europe itself.
And the streets are written in a bubble.
Yeah, I mean, I think that ends up becoming a bit more of the gimmicky part, but with regards to the infrastructure itself, they have a huge documentation center where, like, say for me, my research was about the representation of music in comics. And so if you go and ask them for a request saying that I want to see how many different comics have represented music for different reasons, they can give you an entire catalog, give you the books for you to sit and study them. They have a massive library with all of the most contemporary works in English, Spanish, and French, but mostly French.
Mostly French. They have a little bit of English.
Very little. They had like 2 shelves. And I think that was actually a bit of the alienating aspect of it, which meant that I couldn't read half of the stuff that was there because everything was mostly in French or Spanish. And it's a reality check, right? You've got shelves and shelves and shelves of French literature. And as much as you'd say comics are accessible, there's no fun if you're not able to read them. I mean, I did mention this to her.
Also, I think French has to learn a little bit of English at some point. We are so bad.
Vice versa. Comme si.
Comme si, comme ça.
But yeah, I mean, one of the things that I remember reflecting on when I was there was from my own personal experience. I'm an arts educator. The fact that what do I as a comic book artist do when I'm not working on comics? I teach, and most of the last 2 years has been about teaching children through the medium of comics. I don't teach them how to make comics, but using comics as a tool where we're able to think of art education, think of storytelling using comics, and that's a completely different discussion. The reason I thought of that experience when I was there was just because of how inaccessible a lot of the material in India is to my kids, because we are working in a remote rural village in Uttarakhand, a lot of the children rely on Hindi as the language of access in many ways. I've been trying to build an entire shelf, a repository of comics for them in a language accessible to them. But one is the failure of the school system. You don't have very good training in English. They're generally traumatized enough to not want to speak or learn English. And there's not enough translation to Hindi in my experience of it, especially of like the bigger works, the stuff that maybe I grew up reading. Vani Prakashan's doing some good work though. I've really liked some of the translations, but it's minimal. Like, it's such little work that I'm able to bring to the library to share with the kids.
What would it take, in your opinion, to bring more translation?
I mean, it's a much longer conversation, and maybe we'll get to that. We'll get to that at some point. But with regards to my experience in Angoulême, definitely one thing was with regards to access. I was definitely keen that in some way I'm able to bridge that gap. Sure, one side of it would be to learn French myself. But the other and the larger question is how do we work with translation in comics, right? It's too simplistic to think that, oh, I will just take the text and the images can remain the same. And I remember someone bringing that up here, just in Orijit's conversation as well, right? Translation in prose is usually seen as the translator making an entirely new version of the book in that language because there's a nuance that they bring to it. In comics, you're taking the same visual language and just pasting a new like text onto it. Sometimes I just wonder that is there any way that maybe translation could also involve, like, say, changing the images? How much freedom does, like, say, the translator have to rearrange panels, change the way the book looks, depending on the language as well?
You definitely have to change the cover because, like, my other job is to make book covers, and so it's always a new one, so it's part of the translation. And for comic books, yeah, you are right, like the whole way of reading the sense, like all the graphical, like graphic design work is different.
No, that's true. No, but I mean, anyway, with regards to the bigger question of, like, say, what do we as comic book artists think about when we aren't working on comics? These are some of the things, including translation. What is the culture? How do we build comics culture? And maybe one of the things that, say, as a question to you that, I mean, I remember you talking about quite a lot. And it was basically my entire introduction to the comics movement in France. I've given a bit of a gist about it. But the festival of Angoulême was cancelled this year for various reasons. And there is a complete alt movement that's being built out of, like, you know, the ashes of that fallen festival in some sense. So what is that about?
The Festival of Angoulême was facing deep problems since maybe 10 years. And there have been more and more questions about, like, the way of it was really commodified, really about selling books, really about a certain kind of comics, and also a lot of sexism in this field because the French culture of comics came with by waves, and so the first one was in the 70s, as in the US, and it was actually pretty sexist, and so we have now this new wave of young authoresses that are protesting, and they pretty much shut down the festival this year. They call out for a girl cut instead of a boycott, and so they push their publisher to quit the festival. So so it was really exciting because they build up a whole new festival in every big city of France, but even in, I think it was Belgium, London, and in Italy also. And it was all community built, and it was beautiful. It was free also.
So when you say that they created a new festival and they created a movement, I think another thing that I remember you mentioning was what were the major complaints of, say, independent comic book artists? What does the alt what is the alt movement in France composed of? What are their complaints? What are they unhappy about? Especially when we say that like France has like the biggest like comics culture in like Europe at least.
There is different part of it. I guess the sexism in this field is a big part of it, but you have also the whole consideration of the artist. Like it's very hard to make money out of a creation and to actually live enough to make another one. So you always have to run like after your publisher. So there is like one big battle right now calling like the continuité des artistes, but it's a little bit local and specific. But there is a lot of subjects. One of them, I guess, is it's also like recognition of the words of the author. Like when we say like we need another kind of festival, please listen to us and try to rebuild it like with us. Like because there was like this big affair of sexual assault in the festival that was the starting point of the Girl Code. So listening, I guess, would be nice.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think when we talk about the alt in a festival like this, I understand that some of these are concerns which I think a lot of, I mean, like I definitely relate with. Mm-hmm. How do you sustain yourself as a comic book artist? What is it that, like, a lot of us have to end up like juggling to be able to make ends meet? What are the glass ceilings that some of us end up having to face within the mainstream, knowing that we end up having to work in the mainstream? But in your experience, like say, what are beyond the mainstream, then what are the other alternate, like say, methods of distribution, like or like what exactly is that culture about? Are there a lot of people selling zines? Is there a lot of like say micro publishing that happens? I don't know.
No, I have to say that in India, watching the zine scene is really good because we don't have a lot of zine culture. Yeah. It's mostly a student thing. Mm-hmm. I think when I was a student, like 10 years ago, it was big. But it began to be a little bit less now, the zine culture. No, the alternative is mostly on social media right now.
Right.
The old scene.
Right. Is it okay if I ask you about like another question as a follow-up to that? Sorry, it's just like knowing your work as being, I mean, one is extremely feminist, but also coming from a more eco-feminist lens. You mentioned the Girl Code. A lot of the authors who are a part of that would be belonging to the feminist movement as well in France, and I could see overlaps between the feminist movement and the alternate festivals that were happening. But I was curious, like, what are the current waves of themes, thematics that, like, say, feminism and like, say, generally, like, feminist authors are working with? Are you seeing trends? I mean, it's an open question, but what are people who work, especially women who work with comics, talking about, thinking about, and are there any authors that say, as authors from India, we should look out for and make note of?
I don't know if you should look at for. So the waves mostly are about, we have that. We had this big wave of feminism, maybe 4 to 5 years ago. And it was mostly about violence, so sexual violence, traumas and so on. So I can see emerging a group of authors that are a little bit tired of always speaking about trouble and like how it's hard and like really hard things to draw like 2 years on a subject like sexual assault. It's really heavy. So I can see emerge some science fiction for like feminist eco-fiction and actually more happy and positive way of like maybe imagining the society as it should be. So it's one side. We have a whole scene of documentaries, comic book, mostly about agriculture. That's why the previous panel was really excited for me, because like the subjects are really connected, of course. And I don't know, like I think that also because like the political vibe of the world is not great right now. We have, I think, a whole scene of comic book about the absurdity of the world. So it's a lot about dreams and weird conversation, you know, this kind of absurd. And we were talking the other day, and I was like, this is not a good news, because last time we had a scene about absurdity that came, it was just before the Second World War. So I was like, we are talking about Angoulême, so I have to ask you that.
Okay.
So Samarth was in Angoulême to understand the way of translating music and soundscape into a comic book. Like, you know, we have some signs that we always use in comic book, like you have the little notes of music, you have like some signs, but Samarth wanted to explore a little bit further, and how you can, tell me if I'm wrong, how you can actually listen to the music to your audience through drawing. Tell me more about that.
Okay. So maybe explaining why I'm working with sounds and music in comics would be helpful before I go into what happened in Angoulême. I stay in Uttarakhand, which is basically largely very forested. Mostly, I mean, like the few communities who are still practicing agriculture still do that. Quite a few pastoral communities. There's a lot of out-migration happening. So basically, the forest, I mean, and technically you see it as the pine forest because it's more of an invasive species. Not invasive, it's more of a pioneer species. But there is a lot of the land being reclaimed by some of these forests in some sense. And so generally we're surrounded by a lot of ecology, I'd say. Like you step out of our home and you can go for like a long walk in a pine forest. One of the things I noticed when I was trying to represent these areas in comics is that it's much easier for me to maybe represent soundscapes in urban settings because there's a lot of onomatopoeia for, like, I mean, say the bird says chi chi and the dog goes bhaw bhaw and then the car goes paw paw. There's a whole, like, you know, list of different sounds I can use to represent, like, a world within a city, and it can get more and more complex as you move. When I have to represent an ecosystem, that's when things become a bit tricky because no two birds sound alike, no two insects sound alike. A lot of the times, like say, if I have to talk about how a cicada sounds, how do you represent that in English or in any of the other? Like, it's so complex and there's so many variations in like the way the sound moves and the rhythms and the flows of it. And so I was completely baffled as to how exactly am I supposed to bring this into comics. So that was the first question, that like, say, if I take a simple example as bird calls or like bird songs, how do you bring that into a comic about soundscapes? And then for this project, because I was getting access to the museum and to the library and the rest of that, I thought maybe we take that one step further and think about the representation of music in comics, knowing that music, I'm sure people have made comics about music, and I'm sure that they're not going to just like, I don't know, not represent the music in any way beyond musical notes. And so that was the big research that I ended up conducting in the museum and in the library at Angoulême. And unfortunately, what I figured was that a lot of people just represent music in comics with musical notations. Again, musical notations work within a certain framework, right? Like you have bars, and here the musical notations are just put in for the sake of musical notation. So you can't, like, even somebody who can read sheet music can't understand what music is actually being played. And so you have an entire graphic novel, and I don't mean to crib. Although I crib a lot, I don't mean to crib about this, but like if you have a graphic novel about a pianist or a band, and all you're seeing is them doing the gestures and playing instruments and musical notations to go with it, you're not getting any sense of the feel of that space, of the rhythm of the music, and that entire, the aura around that can be so complex, and it takes your entire, I mean, you get completely swept away with it, right? And I didn't find too many examples of like comics that are working with music in very, very interesting ways. Maybe all of like 2 or 3, which again I can refer to at some point from the notes. But that was largely the exploration that happened. And then as a personal challenge, I started going to the conservatory in Angoulême itself. And I was listening to a jazz band practicing and improvising, mostly amateurs. So they're making a lot of mistakes. Some of them start too early. Some of them, like, lose track of what they're playing halfway through. And that sense of the imperfection of how the harmony builds and breaks and builds and breaks, I'm working on a small exploration with that. But yeah, hopefully I will have something to share in
Can't wait.
when I have time to work on comics, which I'm not. Yeah, that's pretty much what I did in Angoulême.
But
Yeah.
why did you need like the live music? Because you could have like listened to disc and to disc. No, you're not that old. But,
That's true. That's true. I mean, I could have, but I think when you're thinking of like, it's about observation, right? Like if I have to sit and observe something for long enough, you suddenly realize that the crux of what you're observing isn't in just the image itself, but it's in so much more, right? It's in the movement, it's in the silences that follow, it's in the things that lead you to being distracted from your subject as well. Like there's a lot of things that go into the fact of observation itself. I think if I had to plug in music and listen to something that's recorded in a studio where I don't have a bodily understanding of what's happening, I don't know what to represent. Like it can be very abstract. I can always interpret it as color and shapes and whatever else. But I also realize that musicality in comics like is a lot to do with the body as well. And to be able to see how people imbibe that rhythm, everything from like say tapping your feet, some people like shake their heads, others like it's interesting to see how each instrument has a different way in which the body is able to, it's almost like a dance in some sense, right? And then each body is responding to the other across time. So I think that was something that I was keen to be able to bring into the work, because that's the only way I'm able to represent sound. I can't make the reader listen to the sound, because I mean, of course that's a simple way of doing it. Like plug in a song, play the song in the background, and then you read the comic. I didn't want to do that.
Can you give some example of the people that you enjoyed the work in France, like when you did your research, like Blutch?
Oh yeah, but I don't know enough about Blutch. I just liked his work.
Okay, so Blutch is a famous French author, and he's working with like this I don't know, really vivid lines, expressive,
very expressive,
magnificent. If you have the opportunity,
Blutch.
go for,
I mean, in case you're making notes, Blutch, Blutch. Yeah.
And so he worked with with music, and you told me like it was one of the best, like as in not giving a sign of representation, but trying to really express the music.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what I loved about Blutch, like the work that I saw, and it's mostly cartoon strips, so it's like single page strips of his observations of people who play jazz. He was part of the jazz, I mean, not part of the jazz scene, but he used to observe the jazz scene a lot.
I assume he's a musician himself.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, that's the larger discussion that like there's another very interesting book about Paul Klee and his relationship with music, Paul Klee, the artist. And the fact that he understood music as an artist very differently because he was a musician himself, right? And that understanding of music is very different when you know it intimately. I wouldn't be surprised if Blutch is also a musician. But yeah, as in like his cartoon strips are definitely like very influential in me being able to find some direction, I feel. Yeah.
Do we have any I'm curious of the audience. Do you have any point of view of representation in music, in a comic book of music?
Yeah, actually, it'll be lovely to. Can we have a mic, please? Yeah.
Well, should I ask the question first? Or?
You can ask a question, make a statement, do whatever you feel.
I'll make the statement first because
Please,
in the manga tradition, there is this absolute amazing manga which has been adapted into an anime, obviously, called Your Lie in April. And
Can you repeat that?
Your Lie in April.
Okay.
And the way they showcase music, there's this talented boy who plays the piano, whose mother constantly makes him play the piano to an excruciating point. And it's a very heart-wrenching story. It's a story that you need a very strong heart to read. But the way music is shown in Your Lie in April is with excruciating detail. It tells you the ballad, the note, everything to a very excruciating detail. So it's the complete opposite of what you have said, where there is very little detail, but then there is this opposite where there is excruciating detail, every small note. And of course, if you have read manga, you know that it is very high definition. The mangaka pays a lot of attention to detail, and compared to the West, where it is more sound-oriented, onomatopoeia, as you said. There's that boom, whoosh, Marvel Detective Comics. The manga, on the other hand, is more action-based. So if you read mangas like Your Lie in April, it tells you very heavily that, okay, this is the note, this is how it's played, and on top of that, the detail has been so excruciated to the point where you can see the literal note that the player is playing, and you feel the emotions, and you can put the music in the background itself, because these are real songs that he's playing with excruciating details. So this is a complete other one.
Yeah.
But I would like to know your opinion on what is the difference between the East and the West, the Marvel comics versus the Japanese mangas.
Sorry, before I go to that point, thanks so much for this suggestion. It sounds like something I'm going to go as soon as we're done with this talk and find out more about. But then the other thing was a curveball. I feel like, what are our opinions about the East and West?
Because it's completely different. Over here you have the left to right reading, and then the other side you have right to left, the manga side.
I mean, okay, so to be completely honest, it's stories. For me, I'm happy reading any. If I can read comics and then watch a film in different languages, it's a story. I feel like if I have to talk about it as a format, I don't have too many opinions on that. There are specific stories in manga that I've absolutely loved. I'm not too big on the larger superhero tradition of comics. Generally, I think
it's political also, you know. It comes from somewhere. It was built to make America great again, something like that at some point. So
yeah, and I think
it's based on some point of view on the
interestingly,
world.
I mean, even in India, I know that like there was recently, I think Yoda Press published a comic book about the first Muslim superhero in India. I think it's usually political response to larger
it can
movements
be
and
an
trends.
interesting, a very interesting tool. I mean, because it's appealing.
Yeah.
It's very efficient. But
Do I have an opinion about it at this point?
I think, it's not about mangas or comics. Like anything can be good. It's like it depends on the story, the artist, the way it's done.
What I can say though, in two of the examples of manga that have been translated to Hindi really well by Vani Prakashan. One is called Sunhere something ka. Sakura Ka Desh. It's basically, and I'm terrible with names, I'm so sorry. But you can check Vani Prakashan's catalog, something about Sakura Ka Desh, which is a collection of 3 stories of Japanese people living after the bombing in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And it's gorgeous. It's so beautifully done. The other one, which is very well translated, is Ungliyon Ka Orchestra, which, from what I've heard, is only translated to Hindi. It's not been translated to English. I don't know. I might be wrong about that. But there's a Japanese to Hindi translator who translated that one book. And again, beautiful, very nuanced story. which basically is about like a group of deaf children who are being trained in sign language by their instructor, and it's the whole relationship that forms between them, and then the many different sub stories that happen. What I noticed as readership from, like, say, the village, like the kids who've been reading these stories, they're so much more attached to the manga, not because of, and they don't even, I mean, I don't think they are following trends as much. They're not saying that manga is cool, so we should read manga. They just find it as nuanced storytelling. And one of the things that I've taken away as a big like learning during like the last 1 year of working in the library is that children at the age of around 15, like 14, 15, 16, especially in like say rural areas, villages, like say the ones that I've seen, they get really tired of the picture books. Even if you go post like, you know, say a level 5 and the rest, you're not getting extremely deeply nuanced stories in picture books, which is no fault of the picture book itself. It's made for a very different format. And graduating to novels, walls of text, is very difficult, where they are going to find the nuanced storytelling that they're looking for, where they can see the complexity of their life reflected. And so quite often we are losing readers at that point, where a lot of the kids are saying कि नहीं दादा हम लोगों को नॉवल पढ़नी नहीं है क्योंकि बहुत लंबी है, 80 पेज 100 पेज वाली कॉमिक नॉवल कौन पढ़ने वाला है. And I don't know what else to do but to give them a graphic novel or a comic, and they are lapping it up. Like
there was this, like last year also, there was Trubin sir and Lokesh sir who were here on this as well, and I asked them the same thing. And the other point that we made, like I asked them personally afterwards, was there was this tradition before by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry with The Little Prince, where drawings were made and then the text was fused, and it gave rise to such a beautiful narrative where the kids' imagination was brought to page directly, and it made for a very good storytelling. And 100%. How sketching and, as you said, graphic novels can become such a nice medium for more readers to come, and that reading to get even more influence into the market.
And the nuance of stories like that, which can appeal to like people across age groups. Like if somebody has to ask you like, who are you writing for? Like it's not like you're thinking I want to write for like a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old. Quite often you're just writing stories which are borrowing from the essence of your life, right? So I mean, I completely agree that mediums like this need to be definitely like encouraged more, tapped in more, and especially for me as an advocate for like free libraries, independent library spaces for children, I definitely see the need for more comics.
I have some trouble with this whole comics are for children thing. I don't like it. Like,
please explain a little more about that, because I know I think I know where it's coming from, but I'm just curious. I mean, I need you to express why.
As comic book artists, we are always like shown as, it's nice, it's easy to read, you know, you can pass some ideas with it. Like, it's like a Trojan, you know, you are just passing, I'm a little bit uncomfortable with that, because like, does it mean that representation is something childish? Like, I don't know. And also because like in France, we tend to have more public money if we do some educational work. And I have this strong opinion that like artists are artists and educators are educators, and both of them can. It's marvelous when it works together, but it's like strong skills. Like it's not like artists cannot just invite make themselves educator for one day. It's like I don't really like this idea, and also I don't really like the way it puts the idea that comic books are easy to read. Something like you have to read that again and again to really feel the deepness of it.
And I think as much as I still relate to this idea, I can sympathize and understand with where that concern is coming from. And I think that comes out of having a much more nuanced comics culture as well. Just knowing that I wouldn't say that we have at the present moment at least anywhere close to as massive or as widespread a comics culture as is seen.
It's also France. Because we have like a scene of comics for young children, for young adults,
all
and
across
for adults.
Various genres for sure. And to be able to oversimplify the medium to just cater to like simpler minds is unfair, because I mean that's possibly one of the things that I noticed, that say workshops for children, quite often you'd say that, oh, we have to talk about very simple stories, and very like children are generally able to deal with much more complex subjects than
we have to give them some credit.
Quite often. So I think that bias comes not only from the people making the work, but also from the institutions that kind of like govern these structures in a way. Like, and if there's any publishers here, like I don't mean to blame it on you, but I mean these are pressures that like you need it to cater to certain readerships, certain profiles, and the rest of that, which I understand where that pressure comes from. So yeah. Okay, you want to ask a question? I should ask a question. How much longer do we have? Sorry,
I think it's the end. 2 more minutes.
2 more minutes. Okay, you know what? We're not going to say anything
we've
more.
got
Does
one
anybody
question.
else?
We were thinking about like what is the next. What subjects you would love to work on as a comic book artist in the
As much
future?
as I'd love to answer this, I think we can just talk to the people themselves when we meet them over lunch or whatever. But we'll open it out to questions over 2 minutes. Is that fine?
Yeah, I want to know. Though.
Yeah, but we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. Please, if anyone has questions, I think.
Hi, I'm Hari. Thank you for the talk. First of all, I think it's amazing that you all called it Girl Caught and not Boycott. Question for Samarth. I think children engage with any mediums just really differently without any limitations than adults. Have you seen how they engage differently with comics than adults do with your work?
I think one of the things that I noticed them, I mean, of course, you're right. They engage with mediums differently, yes, but that's because they're not working in structures quite often. Like the children I worked with, they'd never read a comic before the workshops that we were conducting and before we made the Comics Corner and the rest of that. They're very happy to identify something as a comic, but I think like especially when they're making comics or reading comics, I don't think they have too many of these like hesitations or like the qualms about like, oh, I don't know how to write, I don't know how to draw. Depends on the age group as well. Okay, let me finish answering this. It really depends on the age group, but quite often there's this priority for play, which I admire completely. If they're having a good time, they don't care about whether you're asking them to sing or dance or play or do homework, or it could be anything. And I think that's one of the things that I try imbibing as well. Like generally just knowing that if I have a play frame, I'm fine. Like as long as I'm having fun and I feel like I'm growing, the output is irrelevant. Like most of the times the children don't even realize that they've read like 10 or 15 books in a month, because if they're having fun, they don't care. They're just reading through it, and it's a byproduct of them having a good time, which I think maybe as comic book artists also, that's something for us to like, at least for me to imbibe, that I just want to have a better time with producing my work instead of working on it till I hate it.
That's what we say like in Angoulême, like it's really childish, the Maison des Auteurs, where like 30 artists in the same building. It's always like, I don't know, a very childish stuff happening, like eating cakes and doing jokes, and we were like, I think it's the vibe of this crowd, like to keep the playful aspect of life alive. So it's not always
play frames
easy.
exist in communities generally much, much, much better than by yourself. So that's about it. And in case you all want to continue the discussion with us, we'll be available for the rest of the day. So
and if you want to see images, obviously you can check on Instagram, and we both have a website, so you can go there.
thank you. Thanks for attending.